The sound of the video call startled me out of my late morning quiet. I had been reviewing a stack of library notes I still kept even in retirement when Adrian's name lit up across the screen. My son's face filled the frame, cheerful and flushed, as if he had just come back from a jog. For a moment my chest warmed. Maybe he was calling just to hear my voice. That hope lasted all of 3 seconds. "Mom," he said, grinning, "great news. We've sold the villa." I froze, the words not making sense. "Sold the villa," I repeated, careful with my tone, like I had misheard. "Yes." We moved quickly, above, asking. Perfect timing. And now Marjorie can finally get the exposure she deserves. The PR agency already signed her on. Big campaign magazines, TV slots, the works. It's going to cost $120,000, but thanks to the villa, it's covered. You should be proud. It's like your gift to her. I heard myself inhale sharply. My villa. My home. Years of work pressed into brick and stone turned into a bankroll for someone else's vanity. My hands gripped the armrest, but I kept my voice steady. "You sold it." Adrian chuckled, leaning back as if this were all lighthearted. "Don't look so serious. You weren't even using it. It's been sitting empty for years. This way it has purpose. You always taught me not to waste things, right?" My silence must have stretched because he filled it with laughter. "Thanks for the fame present, Mom. You'll see it'll be worth it when Marjorie takes off. Imagine having a celebrity in the family." His words slid over me like ice water. He had taken the one space I built for myself and converted it into stage lights for someone else. I wanted to shout to slam my laptop shut, but instead, I pressed my lips together and nodded faintly. The practiced mask of a mother who had learned long ago how to swallow storms. "Good," he said. Relieved by my quiet, "I knew you'd understand." I ended the call with my heart hammering, staring at the blank screen long after his face disappeared, already knowing I would not let it end there. After the call ended, I sat in silence. My palms pressed flat against the desk, as though I could steady myself by anchoring to the wood. The word "sold" echoed through my mind, knocking loose memories I had kept tucked away. I was 43 the year I bought the villa. Adrian was still in college then, and every dollar felt stretched thinner than the last. My husband had been gone for almost a decade, and I had learned to live with both grief and grit. There were nights I took on double shifts at the library cataloging until my hands cramped just to make sure tuition was paid. Vacations became luxuries we never touched. Birthdays passed with cakes I baked from discounted mixes. I told myself each sacrifice was a brick laid toward something lasting. When I signed the deed to the villa, it felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. A modest 2-story home on the edge of Asheville, with wide windows that caught the sunrise. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. My proof that I could build a life on my own terms. I remember turning the key that first day and whispering into the empty rooms we made it. I furnished it slowly. Second-hand tables, shelves, stacked with books. Curtains I sewed on weekends. Every corner carried my fingerprints, each choice quiet but deliberate. It was never just a property. It was sanctuary, the place where I finally allowed myself to rest without guilt. To hear Adrian dismiss it as unused cut deeper than I expected. He had never seen the nights I sat at that kitchen table balancing bills with a calculator and a prayer. He had never felt the weight in my bones the day I carried groceries up the hill after 3 buses and a storm. The villa was those struggles made solid. Now to imagine it transformed into fuel for Marjorie's chase for attention felt like erasure, not just of bricks and beams, but of the years I bled into building it. And yet beneath the ache, something else stirred, a reminder that I had once prepared for this very possibility. The villa was never the first thing I gave up for Adrian, only the most visible. Looking back, I see the trail of sacrifices scattered behind me like breadcrumbs. When he was a boy, I covered his soccer fees by shelving extra books after closing hours, my back aching under the fluorescent lights. Later in college, I shouldered his loans when he struggled to keep his part-time job. I told him not to worry, that education mattered more than pride. The debts never ended. They only shifted shape. A credit card balance here, a car repair there. Once, when pneumonia kept him bedridden, I emptied nearly half my savings to cover his hospital stay. He thanked me at the time, his voice thin with fever. But once he recovered, the gratitude evaporated like steam. The requests returned, dressed up as needs, and I kept answering them. I told myself it was what mothers did. I never asked for recognition. I believed my love would be enough to remind him where his foundation stood. But with each silent bailout, something in him changed. He stopped seeing help as a gift and started treating it as his right. The gratitude shrank to nothing, replaced with expectation. And now to hear him call the villa unused property was like hearing my life's effort dismissed with a shrug. To him, it was just an asset, sitting idle, a tool to be liquidated. He could not see the years of nights I traded sleep for stability, or the mornings I left the house before dawn to cover overtime. My sacrifices had built him a ladder, and he climbed it without ever glancing down. I realized with a cold clarity that in his eyes, I had never been more than scaffolding, meant to be leaned on, never to be seen. That realization settled heavy, but it also reminded me of something I had done long ago, a quiet decision made in the shadows of my own caution. The more I sat with the sting of Adrian's words, the more another memory surfaced, not of sacrifice, but of caution. Years ago, not long after I signed the deed, I had felt a quiet unease. I knew how quickly family could blur the lines between love and possession. Too many stories had passed through the library, whispered in memoirs and biographies of children, turning entitlement into inheritance before its time. So I had taken a step Adrian never knew about. With Daniel Mercer's guidance, I created Callaway Trust LLC, a shell that existed only on paper, but carried real weight in law. It was a tedious process, filled with forms, notarized signatures, and late-night meetings at Daniel's office. At the time, I told myself it was just a precaution, an extra layer of protection in case of illness or dispute. I never imagined I would need it. Now, I powered up my old laptop, the one that still hummed too loudly when it booted, and opened the encrypted folder Daniel had set up for me. There it was, the deed to the villa, transferred cleanly into the trust years ago. Every tax filing, every confirmation, every renewal. My name alone was nowhere near the active ownership documents. The property was not mine as an individual, it belonged to the trust, which meant Adrian and Marjorie hadn't sold my villa. They had sold something that wasn't even legally in my hands to give. They had forged signatures, misrepresented ownership, and committed fraud under state law. My heart thudded, not from fear, but from the sudden shift in power. They thought they had stripped me of sanctuary, but in truth, they had walked headfirst into a trap I set without knowing I would one day need it. I sat back, staring at the glow of the screen, the edges of anger cooling into resolve. For the first time since the call, I felt the ground steady under me, and I knew exactly who I needed to call next. Daniel answered on the second ring, his voice rough but steady, the sound of a man who had seen too many storms to be surprised by another. "Helena," he said, "it's been a while. What's on your mind?" I didn't waste time with small talk. The words spilled out in a low, clipped tone. Adrian had called, the villa was sold, and the money was already feeding Marjorie's climb toward notoriety. For a moment, there was only silence on the line. Then Daniel exhaled a dry laugh that held no humor. "They tried to sell Callaway Trust property?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "They forged my name. They thought the villa was still in my personal ownership. Well, he replied, they've walked themselves into a legal fire. Forgery, fraud, misrepresentation of corporate assets. It's not just a family quarrel anymore. It's criminal. The word settled heavily, but instead of rattling me, it cleared the fog. Criminal. Not just betrayal or selfishness. Something larger. Something that carried consequences I didn't have to manufacture myself. I can draft the injunction today, Daniel continued. The sale is invalid, funds can be frozen, and the buyer will be pulled into this mess, which means pressure on your son and his charming in-laws. We'll need notarization and a filing at the clerk's office, but it's straightforward. I closed my eyes briefly, relief washing through me. Do it, I said. I want it clean. No shouting, no begging. Just the facts. That's the beauty of paperwork, Daniel said, his voice wry. It doesn't need to shout. It just sits there, undeniable. We went through details, names, dates, signatures I had never written. Each line was another stone laid on the path that would lead them straight to a reckoning. My hands didn't shake as I took notes. Rage had no place here. Planning did. When I ended the call, the quiet of my apartment felt different, less like grief, more like preparation. I wasn't powerless. I had already built the defense years ago, and now it was unfolding exactly when I needed it most. All that remained was to let the first domino fall, and I knew precisely how to begin. 2 days later, Daniel's office confirmed the injunction had been filed and the papers served. The courier's receipt arrived in my inbox, stamped and sealed. It was done. No raised voices, no family showdowns. Just signatures, envelopes, and a chain of consequences that would find its way to their doorstep. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't rush to explain myself or soften the blow. Instead, I opened the old family group chat, the one muted months ago, when every message had become a demand or a complaint. My fingers hovered for a moment, then typed 2 words. Check your mail. That was all. No accusations. No clarifications. I pressed send and set the phone face down on the counter. The kettle clicked off, steam curling into the kitchen air as I poured water over a tea bag. The quiet was steadying, not empty. Each clink of the spoon against porcelain reminded me of how different this silence was from the kind I'd endured before. I wasn't swallowing my voice out of fear or habit. I was choosing stillness, letting the documents speak where I no longer needed to. I carried the cup to my small table by the window and watched the city settle into dusk. Somewhere across town, or maybe across a screen, Adrian would be reading those words. Marjorie too. And soon enough, the weight of certified envelopes would arrive in their hands. I didn't wonder what their faces looked like when they opened the mail. I didn't need to. Shock has a universal expression, and I had no doubt it would replace Adrian's careless grin. For once, I wasn't the one scrambling to cover, to rescue, to fix. The storm was theirs to weather now. I took another sip, the bitterness of the tea grounding me, and felt the smallest thread of satisfaction wind its way through my chest. The first domino had fallen, and already I could sense the tremor moving outward. By morning, it wouldn't just be envelopes rattling their peace. It would be every promise they had made on money that was never theirs to spend. The first email reached me before sunrise, forwarded from Daniel's office. A polite inquiry from a PR coordinator asking why several deposits had bounced. By mid-morning, the tone had shifted. Another message arrived sharper, warning of canceled sponsorships if immediate payment wasn't received. An hour later, a third, this one from a magazine editor demanding assurance that their upcoming feature wouldn't be tainted by unsettled financial matters. It was the sound of a carefully built illusion starting to crack. Marjorie had been parading herself online for weeks, soft lighting designer dresses, captions about new beginnings. She spoke of her brand as though it were already established, as though the world had simply been waiting for her arrival. On her social media pages, The countdown to her big reveal marched on. The comments glowed with admiration. None of her followers saw what was really happening behind the screen. But the agents, the vendors, the venues, they knew. Contracts didn't care about followers or filters. They cared about cleared checks. And the checks were no longer clearing. Adrian must have tried to juggle the fallout fielding calls and pushing delays because one of the emails mentioned his name, directly asking for Mr. Calloway's immediate explanation. I pictured him pacing, scrambling for lies, realizing too late that Charm couldn't pay invoices. Still, the Whitmores kept posting. Sienna shared photos of champagne glasses, lined in rows. Marjorie wrote about her incredible journey. The show went on even as the stage floor gave way beneath them. I said nothing. I didn't need to. Each frozen payment, each withdrawn contract, each panicked call was louder than anything I could have said. By evening, Daniel sent me a final update. Multiple vendors were threatening legal action of their own. The dream they'd stolen from me to fuel was dissolving in real time, and the collapse had only just begun. The call came late, just past midnight, when the city was quiet, and the only light in my apartment came from the glow of the phone. Adrian's name flashed on the screen again and again until I finally answered. His voice burst through before I could speak. "Mom, what did you do? Do you realize what you've started? Marjorie's contracts are collapsing. We're drowning here. You have to fix this." I let the silence stretch calm against his panic. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. "I didn't start this, Adrian. You did when you forged my name and sold what was never yours." He faltered, but pressed on. "We're family. Families help each other. I did this for all of us, for our future." "No," I said quietly. "You didn't do it for us. You did it for her. And you've never once seen me as family in the way you claim. You saw me as a wallet, an ATM you could press whenever life got hard." His breath caught, and I pressed on, not with anger, but with clarity. "Who covered your tuition when you couldn't keep up? Who paid your hospital bills when pneumonia knocked you flat? Who cleared your credit cards, your car repairs, your debts? You never even admitted out loud every time I was there. I saved you without a word. And now you call theft a gift." There was nothing on the line but his breathing, shallow and uneven. The silence said more than any excuse could. For the first time, I felt the weight shift. He knew I was right. I didn't bend. I didn't soften my words or offer rescue. I ended the call with a quiet click, set the phone aside, and sat in the stillness, knowing this time the storm would not pass over him, but through him. And by morning, it wasn't just Adrian calling, it was the world outside beginning to close in. It didn't take long for the story to spread. The headline ran on local news sites first, then climbed into regional outlets. Local family accused of real estate fraud to fund $120K influencer scheme. Beneath it, a photo of Marjorie posing in one of her staged shoots. A silk dress, a champagne glass, mocked her more than any caption could. The community turned quickly. Comments poured in, laughter, sharp sympathy, gone. What had once been curated admiration for her brand flipped into ridicule. Sponsorships dropped overnight, the same companies that had once promised magazine spreads now issuing statements to protect their names. In court, the collapse became official. The forged signatures were displayed, the paper trail laid out clean and damning. I sat at the witness stand and spoke plainly, dates, accounts, records. I didn't need to embellish. The evidence spoke louder than any emotion could. Adrian sat at the defense table, pale and hollow-eyed. Marjorie shifted in her seat, her usual confidence stripped bare. Even Sienna wouldn't meet my gaze. When the judge finally leaned forward, the courtroom stilled. "Mr. Calloway, Mrs. Whitmore, you didn't just break the law, you broke trust. You forged her name and treated her life's work as your family ATM. When you did that, You forfeited the right to call yourselves her family. The gavel cracked once, final and cold. Charges were filed, sentencing to follow. I rose, gathered my things, and walked past the cameras, the reporters, the stares. I didn't feel triumphant. What I felt was something simpler, steadier. I was free. And with that freedom came the quiet pull toward one last place I needed to go, the villa itself. The villa looked the same as the day I had last walked through its doors. The shutters still carried the same chipped paint, the floors still creaked in familiar spots, and the shelves still held the books I had stacked there years ago. Yet as I moved from room to room, I felt the distance between memory and belonging. It was no longer sanctuary. It was simply a house filled with echoes of who I used to be. I paused at the kitchen counter, the place where so many bills had been balanced, meals prepared, letters written. Slowly, I took the key ring from my pocket and laid it down. The gesture wasn't dramatic, only quiet, my way of releasing the weight I had carried for too long. Back in Asheville, I sat with my phone in hand and scrolled through the names that had bound me in silence for years. Adrian, Sienna, Marjorie. Each deletion felt like lifting a stone from my chest. I opened a new account at a small credit union, one unlinked to anything or anyone from the past. For the first time, every cent was mine alone. The call came a week later. A detective informed me that since my case reached the news, others had stepped forward, children who had been drained by their families, signatures, stolen accounts, emptied. My story had cracked something open. When I hung up, I sat still for a long while. A smile found its way to my lips, not out of victory, but recognition. I hadn't destroyed my family. They had done that themselves. All I had done was stop shielding them from the smoke of their own fire, and in that truth, I finally found peace.